I hated everyone. I hated the world. The more I realised people were frightened of me, the more safe I felt. My whole world just fell apart. Nobody can be trusted on any level. So I planned it. I knew I was gonna, that was the end. Why did my mum want me? Why wasn't I wanted by my own mum? Like, I think when I grew up, like in school, and I used to see kids in school and primary school, and even on TV, you see all these loving, doting mothers. Like, it's the most important love in the world, or so you'd assume. I was just, why was I rejected? Why was I? I didn't know, initially. I didn't know I was taken off my mum. You see, because I was subsequently taken away from my mum forcefully. But at the time, it was more, I was just rejected by it. I didn't find out till I was 16. I was going through, obviously, quite a lot of stuff at school. I was in trouble with the law. I was in trouble, behavioural with my behaviour. My mum and dad have always told me I've been adopted. I can't remember the conversation. But they always showed my brother, or told my brother, the context to his adoption, why he was adopted. But they never shared that with me. So when they went away for a weekend, I broke into the safe and read all the social service papers. Because they'd said they was going to give me them when I was 18. It explicitly stated that, so my father got murdered, got stabbed in the back. And then subsequently my mum, already, heavy in drug use and alcohol, and took me to a hotel room when I was 2 in Gloucestershire, left me in a hotel room, and went to a festival, got high on drugs, come back, set fire to the hotel room, and left me inside when I was 2. And although I can't, recall the memory of being inside of there, I think when I talk about it, it's difficult sometimes for me to, conceptualize that happening to anybody. And I can see why mum and dad kept those papers from me. They didn't do it intentionally to harm me. They always told me I was adopted. So they did it because they knew delivering that kind of information to a already very hostile young man who feels like a reject from the world. Like, it's a recipe for disaster, right? And it was. It was. It ruined me. Exacerbated my behaviour. The world showed me a mother's love is unbreakable, yet I was rejected by my mother. My parents didn't keep things from me, and I saw that as a deception, as another form of, maybe rejection of some sort. I don't know. There was some separation there. Like, I just always felt like everything was a lie. I hated everyone. I hated the world. At primary school, kids used to call me the second-hand kid. I was never socially integrated very well. People started being scared of me. Parents wouldn't let the kids hang around with me. But I'd like to think it's understandable why a young boy would feel like that. When I started becoming really violent, I got kicked out of my first few schools for like real extreme violent attacks to bullies. People who called me second-hand kid. I bit people. So yeah. But the more I realised people were frightened of me, the more safe I felt. Eventually, a tool almost necessary for the beliefs that I had about myself and who I was. I just wanted to keep everyone at bay. Not only did I want to keep them at bay, I wanted them to be scared of me. Because if they were scared of me, they wouldn't hurt me. Show people that I can't be broken, while subsequently breaking myself to pieces along the way. I eventually started taking steroids, and I got my first tattoo at like 15. And then when I first got tattooed, I remember the kids at school and people go, "Oh my God, as if he's got a tattoo." Like, everyone sort of had this reaction of like, oh my God, this guy must be tough. It's, you know, it sounds strange now when you look back, but back in them days, people didn't have tattoos. They were quite a little, well, they were more taboo than they are now. But the more I started getting more and more tattoos and getting bigger and bigger at the gym, it actually sustained my violence to a certain degree, because my presence alone, my arrogance, my presence alone, sort of like I could see was, you know, putting people on the back foot before me having to actually do anything. I created the perfect character for that environment. I met Tracy when I was 18, my biological mom when I was 18. And that was a significance in my behaviour as well, I suppose. Because obviously, you know, when I first met her, the first time we met, we took drugs together. And now when you look back at it, and if anyone looks at that, they'd be like, oh my God, what kind of mother would do that with a child? But to me at the time, because of the person I was like, oh my God, this woman's ace. Like, what a cool mom, you know, like incredible, you know. And I was even with a few friends, I think, and I think a few of my mates, because when I went to meet her, I was a little bit apprehensive about meeting her on my own. So I went with a couple of friends, and I think because them friends did drugs as well, it was all like, oh my God, she's ace. Like, and I was like, oh man, this is amazing. So then, you know, I still lived in Cleethorpes, and then I started destroying my life in Cleethorpes quite a bit. Stayed in contact with Tracy a little bit. Moved to Lincoln after I, you know, burnt all my bridges in Grimsby and Cleethorpes. And then that's when, you know, I came here for a fresh start, but yeah, it didn't transpire. When I first moved to Lincoln, first job I got was on the doors. I was selling drugs on the doors. I was collecting money from a family that I used to collect money for in Lincolnshire. And my life was the same. Although I swore to myself coming here was going to be the fresh start, you know, but then, you know, how can you expect a location to change an individual? My life stabilized, but not in a good way. It just stabilized as where it was. You know, I was still drinking, still taking drugs, still, you know, quite violent. Me and some friends had decided to have a party, and we invited Tracy over because Tracy was like, "Oh, I can get you some acid, some drugs." We was like, "Oh, cool." So Tracy came to a party with us, and it all ended up back at my house for whatever reason. There was loads of us at the time. And everyone left to go home at a silly hour of the morning, and I was left with Tracy. We was both, you know, intoxicated, and we sat on the sofa, and everything was like really quiet for a minute, if I remember. Really, really quiet, and she put her hand on my leg. And I think at first, sort of, you know, feeling, I was like, oh, I don't quite like that. But then she moved her hand up my leg. So I stood up, and I was like, oh, it's making me feel really strange. I don't like this. And she was like, oh, no, it's fine. Sit down. She said, it's nothing. Sit down. So I sat down, and within minutes she did it again. And she moved the hand really fast and, you know, towards my crotch. And I stood up, sort of really. I remember distinctively not screaming, not shouting, not anything. I just remember standing up and sort of trying to process what had just happened. And I remember, and this will give you an idea of what type of woman that lady was. She looked at me and she said, "It's not like I've been your mother." And it was at that point I knew what I thought she was trying to do was what she was trying to do. And I think that was one of the tipping points for me, because The world was lied to me my entire life. Everything was kept secret from me. You know, I was rejected from my mum. The kids didn't want me to integrate with them. My mum and dad had kept things from me, which at the time, you know, I thought I had a right to know. When I met Tracy, I had a little bit of a sense of, oh my God, I feel at home. You know, she's taking drugs together. She's like, you know, she's cool. She's everything. And I think it was the first maybe time in my actual life where I felt like I belonged somewhere. And then that night when she did that, it was just, yeah, it was, I can't put it into descriptive words. My whole world just fell apart. Like nobody can be trusted on any level. I know it was using drugs and it was, you know, it was dysfunctional behaviour, but I felt like I fitted in and I was close to something, to someone that you know, was initially my biological mum, and then she betrayed me in a way she betrayed me in a way I wouldn't wish upon anybody. Yeah, shit time that. I just remember I didn't even respond. I didn't know how to respond. So I went downstairs and stood near the door and I rung a taxi. And I stood at the door and she was saying from the top of the stairs that she didn't move from the sofa. So she didn't even come to the top of the stairs. She was just stood I could hear her from the sofa. And I was stood all the way at the front door and she was just saying to me, we can just start over, just come back, it's fine, I won't do it again. I'm sorry I overstepped the mark, but I just remember stood there hoping and praying for this taxi just to arrive. I couldn't have got further entrenched in hell at that point. I was down with the demons, man. Like I was down with the demons at the bottom pit, digging further. So I didn't have many people to turn to because obviously the type of person I was anyway, people were only necessarily friends with me because of either my reputation or, you know, that character, which was people didn't want to, you know, you weren't going to get that close to him. So I didn't have people to, you know, talk to about that stuff. And so a week or so later, I remember going to B&Q to get the stuff that I needed. I put a hole in the joist, screwed in a hook, tied a rope, put it around my neck. I had two friends living with me at the time, and both of them were out. So I planned it. I knew I was gonna, you know, that was the end. I put it around my neck and kicked the suitcase away, and almost, it must have been instantaneously, Sean come through the door because he'd left some stuff. And he come running upstairs and was like, Kyle, you know, he was just saying he was coming upstairs. He told me, you know, he wanted to come upstairs and speak to me about something that he'd lost and something. And he found me almost immediately hanging from the joisting in my living room, in my bedroom. And he got me down, apparently pulled and bent the hook, believe it or not. And I was on the ground and I come round pretty quick, he said, but they rang the ambulance and they come. I refused to get in the ambulance. And I remember distinctively being so angry with him. Like, I was so upset with him. I refused to go to the hospital, although they almost had me sectioned because they said the significance of what happened to me. So instead they got a team out to come speak to me, and I must have been able to convince them somehow that, I don't know how they didn't take me in, if I'm honest. I don't know. My friend Sean at the time said he wouldn't leave my side, so I think they was quite happy with the support that was going to be there if they did have to leave. But I just remember being so angry with him. Like, And then I remember that night going to sleep. Well, just before going to sleep, I was laid in bed and all I was thinking about praying to God, like, why the fuck are you keeping me here? Like, what is this funny to you? Like, I just remember thinking that this must be like someone sat there and is enjoying this or something. So I was like, I just didn't, I couldn't understand why these things were happening. And I remember screaming and shouting, you know, but Sean wouldn't leave the other side of my room. And I remember just laying in bed screaming and shouting sort of incessantly. He said it was almost like, he said he could only maybe imagine it being like listening to somebody who's lost a family member. I was just so angry and so pissed off at the world. And eventually I woke up the next day and everything had changed. Everything had changed in a way that I, even to this day, 15 years later, can't describe. Like, everything looked differently, everything smelt differently, everything sounded different. As I woke up that morning, it's as though everything that had happened prior to that day was a dream. Yeah, that's probably the best way I can describe it. When I woke up, it was like everything that happened prior to that day was just this big dream. And I was like, oh my God, what just happened to me? It was a very strange sensation. You know, I was very curious about what was happening. It wasn't painful. It didn't hurt. It wasn't euphoric. It was just so different, like so different. I started to sort of like try and navigate this new sense of everything. And while I was gathering this sense of this new world, it was almost like I could look back at the dream, shall we say, what happened prior to that night, this dream that I'd woken up from, and I could see this character that was in this dream, and it was like it wasn't me, if that makes sense. It wasn't me, like, who was sat there trying to analyze this stuff now. And it led me down these different places. You know, I picked up psychology books, and then I read, there's actually a book on here called The Leap. I've still got it to this day. It was the first book that I read about spiritual awakenings. Because when I started, you know, when you Google stuff, you know, I went down this place and it was like, he spoke about spiritual awakening. And I was never spiritual, wasn't religious. Prior to that, the first page, it said, people experience these usually in near-death experiences. And I was like, oh, okay. So, all right, you're sold. I understand, right? Maybe there's something in this. Like, so I read about spiritual awakenings and it literally fit everything. All my experience that I was having, this separation of self, this observation of self it was pinpoint, so detailed and relatable to what I was going through at the time. You know, when I look back now, I'm like, thank God it happened, because that was the starting point for me to understand that there's a lot of value in knowledge, right? So I'm like, because without that knowledge, maybe where would I be now? You know, would I still be wandering the plains of the earth going, what happened to me that day? You know, and would have I ever fell back into the trap of being, you know, that character again? I don't know. We don't do what ifs here. So I read the book and I understood I understood the value in knowledge at that point. And prior to that, I had no GCSEs. You know, I didn't go to school really. I didn't turn up for my GCSEs, so I had no education. But yeah, that was the first point in my life, I think, where I really understood the value in knowledge. So then I went on this big journey of understanding, okay, so if I can find out and understand what happened to me in that moment, can I start to analyze and unpick my life, like the character prior to this one? Like, why did he do what he did? You know, why was he that way? And then I started picking up psychology books, you know, attachment theories, complexity theory, looking at different sort of like modalities of behaviour, you know, neuroscience, looking at the connections, why the brain works a certain way, corresponding to different sort of like environmental upbringings and environmental cues. And the more I started to understand about things like attachment theory, like the first primary goal of an infant when a child is born, its primary goal is to attach to a caregiver, because without that attachment, the child perishes, right? If you look at it in the simplistic form. So when the child is born, it needs to attach to a caregiver. Now, the dynamics of the attachment between you and that caregiver shape how you see yourself in the world around you, right? Obviously, my first few years, I'm being neglected. I'm having cigarette butts put out on me. I'm, you know, being malnourished. I'm being left in day-old nappies. I'm then put in a hotel room. It's set on fire. My first 3 years of life are creating this map of the world, right? And I ask anybody to argue that that isn't quite a frightening world to live in, right? It almost sounds like hell, yeah? So for me as an organism back then, not Kyle, a small child, for my survival, what do I need to do? I need to create something that's going to protect me from this environment, right? So that's where he subsequently came from. But he was always strengthened by his experiences in the early stages, you know, being called second-hand kid. You know, the world's not very nice. You know, people aren't kind. People tell you they love you, but yet they do all these horrible things to you, you know. So throughout my whole early years, this character was reinforced. At the same time, there's an angel here that we're not spoken about much. My mother, you know, an angel who, under every single circumstance that I gave her to give up on me and, you know, wipe her hands clean of me, and I did some heinous things, she just would not quit, would not give up. She just tried to she showered me with love. It was just rejected from me all the time. I couldn't absorb it. I couldn't accept it. It was unfamiliar. So I pushed it away. And you know, when I look back at my adopted mum, I just think, I wonder what would have happened if it wasn't for you. Like, if I didn't have some idea or some kind of, you know, understanding of what love could potentially be. I got my GCSEs, did my GCSEs. Sadly, I went into my first year of my undergrad in psychology, and we lost Dad, and it was a sad time, actually, to be fair, because I wanted my father to see me graduate. You know, one of the hardest things that comes to the forefront of my mind was, through this transition of discovering this new character and learning so much about myself, I still had this heavy weight of shame, like, of the things that I'd done, you know, because although I established that this character was, you know, created in accordance with a pretty traumatic and horrific experience growing up, you know, I still take full accountability for his behaviour. And for many years, I had such a heavy weight of shame, and I just couldn't shake this feeling of shame. And while I was reading these books, there was a big pinnacle point where it was like, you need to learn to forgive yourself. So I was like, okay, let's start that journey. Oh, it was not easy, you know, years. And I mean, not just a couple of years, maybe 5-6 years of constant, even to the point where, you know, I'm looking up at the sky and going, you know, why, please, like, is this shame ever going to go? Like, can I, you know, apparently it's a part of the process, yet it's not moving. You know what I mean? I'm still weighed down by this shame and this, you know, this embarrassment and whatnot. But it took me a long time and a process I did get through. But I still, you know, hold myself fully accountable for the things that I've done. And when I talk about this character still being integrated, he is integrated. He is a part of me. He always will be. But one of the other really, obscure transitions was understanding that that character loved me in a way no one or nobody's ever loved me before, because that character tried to protect me from horrific pain and suffering, and he would not let anybody close to him, nobody. He would fight, bite, crawl, do everything he can to move away anyone or anything that he perceived as a threat, to protect that small boy that was in that hotel room that day. So I had to, have a bit of a conversation. It sounds a bit strangish, but I'm sure people understand. There was a time of love for him and gratitude, because at those times, there was nobody in my life, not even my mother and father who adopted me, who were willing to go to the lengths that he was willing to go through to look after me. Although, subsequently, those adaptations didn't serve me or the people around me growing up very well. I love him and I'm grateful for him. Kind of feel a little bit bad for him as well at the same time. It's really strange. It's a strange feeling, It's a strange feeling. When we lost my father, I went and got my GCSEs, got obsessed with knowledge, got my bachelor's in psychology, got my master's in forensic psychology, and then I've gone on to my PhD research in behavioural and evolutionary psychology. I got registered with the British Psychological Society, so I'm a registered and recognised psychologist by the E.P.I.C. I'm registered as a graduate basis for chartered membership. So once I finish my PhD, I'll be a doctor of psychology. Crazy. Yeah, absolutely wild. So I, through my first years at university, I'm in my element now because I'm really loving and I'm really enjoying learning. So the books have literally ignited something in me, and because they helped me so much, I never had therapy. I never had any cognitive behavioural therapy, and never had anything like that. It's books which really, took hold of my life and knowledge, and helped me understand myself and helped me change my behaviour. Gave me the fire and the drive to go to university. During my placement at the NHS, I started as a support worker, then went in as an AP for the psychiatric intensive care units, the psychiatric wards. Then I worked for the crisis response team. So I used to go into the community and help young individuals in crisis. I saw people in the psychiatric intensive care units, the psychiatric decisions units. I was involved with the process of helping individuals in those kind of particular psychological states. I did that for 5-6 years while I worked while doing my undergrad and my masters, and then I really realised that I've accomplished so much, and I know I can continue to accomplish real big things. I had this belief, and it was all, again, goes to the books, like an uneducated man who had no GCSEs consuming 50, 60, 70 books, like lit this thing in me. Like I got obsessed with developing myself and proving to myself and anybody who knew me when I was young and hasn't seen me since, that anybody can be whatever they want to be. And I mean, like, be whatever they want to be, anything. Experienced and psychologically informed coaching. It wasn't epic at that time, so that's what I thought. I thought I was like trying to write everything out, trying to like make some ideas. It's like, yeah, experienced, Kyle, my own life experience, an expert by experience. psychologically informed through my psychological accolades, coaching. So I'm going to help people, I'm going to coach people to understand themselves and, break through destructive patterns and such. And then I laid in bed that night and I was like, oh my God, that's epic. Like the acronym's EPIC, and that's where EPIC comes from. The experienced and psychologically informed coaching. My idea of EPIC psychology is to not draw the, the child out the individual, but to draw upon that potential, that career changing, life changing, circumstance changing, future changing potential by showing people who they are today, so who's sat in front of me today, what created this person, so what past experience created this person that we see here today, where would this person like to go, who would we like to see in the future, and then creating interventions and pathways using psychological theory and principle to help those individuals access that beautiful individuality and weave it into this world, help people understand their pain if they've got pain, understand their suffering if they've got suffering, but how to transmute that into something unrecognisable and maybe make them unrecognisable themselves, by implementing, our frameworks for individuals. There's possibilities are endless for anybody, but one thing we do here, and that is we understand that my path isn't your path. It most definitely isn't. That's why we don't lean into therapy to a degree, and we help people from all places. People in crisis, if you've broken up with somebody, something is what people would deem as simple or small, like as a breakup in a relationship. I don't get to decide how you feel, even if I've had the same experience as you. It will affect you different than it'll affect me. So I work with anybody in any form of crisis, existential crisis, relational crisis, identity problems crisis, emotional affect. I help people understand themselves and help navigate themselves into a beautiful future with resilience, due diligence, drive, strength, courage, bravery, and content. I think that will naturally come. I think content and peace comes when we understand why. We understand why we are who we are. I don't think enough of us ask that question. There's so much more in there, and we'll find it, and we'll get it out.